It was hard, to be honest, to make the decision to stop, because your identity becomes so tied up with being the travel guy that you start worrying, like, well, if I'm not traveling, then are people going to care? And eventually I realized, one, everything I had done can never be taken away from me. I still did all that. And two is, like, if you look at a lot of other people who are known for travel, like Rick Steves or Pauline Fromer, people like they don't travel full time.
G'day and welcome to the White Travel Podcast.
We're Kaz and Craig Makepeace, your hosts, ready to help you travel more and create better memories, no matter your chosen lifestyle. Well, g'day guys, and welcome to another episode. In this episode, we're chatting with Gary Arndt from the Everything Everywhere blog. Now, we're big proponents of allowing travel to evolve with your lifestyle. You define the rules of how it best suits your values, your dreams, and your lifestyle choices. And Gary Arndt shows us how travel has evolved for him from being a 9-year nomad, constantly traveling, to living the settled life without travel being the focus of it. Now, in 2007, Gary sold his house in exchange for nearly a decade of daily adventures around the world. Sharing his experiences on his blog, he quickly became one of the biggest and most well-known blogs in the world, especially noted for his photography, which has won numerous awards. But this past year's pandemic has caused him to take a huge pivot in business, with a loss of his business literally overnight. Gary switched to pursuing a long-term itch he had to create the Everything Everywhere daily podcasts. And now this podcast has exploded in growth and in under a year has reached 100,000 downloads per month, which is a massive feat in the podcasting world. So join us as we chat about all of this. And if you haven't subscribed already, hit that button on your favorite listening platform. And if something resonates with you, share this podcast with a friend and discuss it with them, because I know you're going to love all the insights Gary shares with us about how travel changes and, of course, creating a successful podcast. All right, Gary, thanks for joining us all the way from Wisconsin. We're happy to have you on the podcast.
Well, it's nice to talk to some fine North Carolinians.
We got that southern accent happening, hey?
Yeah, as we keep saying, man, we are from the South. We are from the deep South, way down south as you can get.
Y'all, mate.
Yeah.
How are things going for you up in Wisconsin? How have you been surviving the pandemic and the isolation that we've all been forced under? Bit hard for a typical nomad, right?
The truth is, I'm busier now than I probably have ever been when I was traveling. I'm literally working more now than I would normally do on the road. So I'm not even noticing that much, because I spend so much. I've had a few opportunities to travel and I've turned them all down just because of all the stuff I have going on right now.
Yeah.
And have you been in Wisconsin like all of this year and most of last year? And whereabouts in
Since
Wisconsin
August. I'm outside of Appleton, which is close to Green Bay, so northeast Wisconsin. I would say if I was to get in a car right now, I could be in Lambeau Field in like 30 minutes.
Yeah, wow. And that's your home state, correct?
Yeah. Not that there's a whole lot. I mean, so I lived in Minneapolis last year, and then I ended up moving here in August after all the stuff went down, and I just didn't really see the point anymore of paying the rent I was paying for my neighborhood, which used to be a really nice neighborhood. So one day I just rented a U-Haul and I put all my stuff in the back and I just left.
Sure. Yeah, well, I guess, that's something that you're used to doing, and I know that we are, is moving frequently and deciding that something doesn't fit anymore. And the beauty of sort of, I guess, living a minimal life as you have for the past however many years, you can sort of pack up and move quite easily.
Well, it wasn't quite as minimal anymore, because after I moved into an apartment, you have dishes and
accumulated
a couch. And,
true.
A mattress and all that stuff. And then it filled up not a big U-Haul, but a small one. And it did take a while for me to pack everything together and put it in. But
yeah,
probably a lot simpler than it otherwise would have been.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sort of how does that feel? Because you've lived, and we'll talk a little bit in a moment about your travel life and how long you've been doing it. But how does it feel to now sort of have more possessions? Is it something you are okay with, or do you miss sort of just having a backpack? How has that change been for you?
When I stopped traveling full time, I think I was ready for it. I just got burned out after a while.
Mm,
So having
mm,
a large computer screen that I can edit photos on
mm.
and having a proper couch you can lay down on and things like that, I don't have a problem with that at all. I certainly have a lot less than what I had before I started traveling. Um, and to be honest, I could probably, a lot of what I had is stuff left over from that phase of my life 15 years ago. And in fact, I remember, so it was about, I don't know, 4 years ago that I decided to like get an apartment. And I remember unpacking stuff, and it was like hitting the pause button. I hit pause back in 2007, and then I was hitting pause again to make it go again because I was literally taking stuff out of boxes that had been sitting there for almost a decade, and nothing had happened to this stuff. Nothing had happened to my clothes, the dishes, everything else. And it was like, okay, now I'm just kind of starting again. And I had all these dishes, and I didn't like, I don't need all these dishes. I don't need all these glasses. I ended up throwing out quite a bit, but I could probably even get rid of a lot more because I just don't need that much.
Yeah, it's kind of sounds similar to us. We've got stuff still in boxes way back home in Australia that we haven't seen for like
20 years.
20 years, and it'd either be way out of fashion or way out of use.
Yeah, I think having
and
like
each time we do.
a 10-year rule is a pretty good one. If you haven't used it or seen it in 10 years, you don't need it.
No.
That's the nomad's mantra. Usually it's a 6-month
even
rule
less for
normally.
clothes. Yeah, home goods and stuff,
yeah.
totally, but even less for clothes. But like,
yeah, each time we look in the boxes, we're like, why did we even keep this? And so we reduce it each time.
Yeah, we've got stuff like, we've purchased in Asia and Africa and, various places. Oh, this will be cool for a house one day. But yeah, I could just imagine that like the thought process has changed a lot since then.
And so how long were you traveling for before you hit the burnout? And what kind of things started to tell you, like what kind of signs were there that started to tell you that you were burnt out and a change was needed?
So I started traveling in March of 2007, and I stopped about 9 years later. And I was in a hotel in Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic. And I don't know why it was this place or why it was that day, but I was just sitting on the bed, cross-legged, because there was no desk in my hotel room and the Wi-Fi was really bad. And like that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And I was like, screw this. It was just getting tired. It was just kind of just getting sick of it after a while. And eventually it was hard, to be honest, to make the decision to stop because your identity becomes so tied up with being the travel guy that you start worrying like, well, if I'm not traveling, then are people going to care? And eventually I realized, one, everything I had done can never be taken away from me. I still did all that.
Mm.
And two is like, if you look at a lot of other people who are known for travel, like Rick Steves or Pauline Fromer, people like they don't travel full time. They have lives. They have a place where they live, and that's kind of how I rationalized it. And in the end, I think no one really cared. And in hindsight, I probably should have done it sooner. To be honest, I think it would have been better for me and my health and everything else if I had probably stopped traveling full time, maybe 2 or 3 years before I did.
Yeah, obviously, like you've been going hard for so long and moving around fairly frequently. I guess you had, breaks back in the US and back in Wisconsin and stuff like that. But yeah, dealing with, time zone changes and like nutrition challenges, different foods that you can't get in certain places if you want to focus on that, like staying physically active. And yeah, it does add up after a while.
Yeah, a lot of people I know that traveled for long terms, they would stay in a place for often very long stretches, like up to 6 months. And I never did that. maybe I would stay one place for like a month to kind of rest. And that's about it. Otherwise, I was moving quite a bit. And I was actually traveling, not just being a digital nomad or living overseas, but actually running around quite a bit. And that's, I think, what kind of led to burnout.
Yep. Yeah, we understand, and we think it's so important to let travelers thinking about doing this know that yes, it's an amazing life and it looks so glamorous on the Instagram feed and all of that, but behind the scenes it is very challenging, particularly for your full-time travel. We found that on our RV trip of the US, and we were like you, we've been traveling pretty much nomadically, although we've like stopped to live in other countries, but doing it for like 23 years, and you do reach a point where you're absolutely exhausted. And then, important things start to suffer, like your relationships and your health. And we got to that point where it was like, we can't do this anymore. Like, and we went through that identity crisis that you were talking about, because this was our life. It's who we thought we were. But it was like, we need a change. We need a base just to chill out.
Yeah, and we weren't even like traveling like in your pace and your style.
Yeah.
Like we pursued the working holiday visa for a significant amount of our time, like being based in Ireland for a year, Asia for 6 months, and then like the US obviously, and explore a region, working jobs, earning the currency, and then building our blog. So we weren't going as hard and fast as you. And
but still, we had kids.
Yeah.
Kids came in the mix.
Every different elements at play, obviously. But what's the list of countries you're up to now? Like, are you still counting? You want to count?
Oh yeah, I keep it on my website. Depends what you define as a country. If it's like UN countries, I'm up to like 130. If it's like the Traveler Century Club list, which includes, obscure islands and territories, it's 204. But I haven't.
Wow.
I literally have done nothing in the last year. I have not taken my camera out of my camera bag in over a year.
You haven't? That's surprising for a photographer.
No,
because you used to do going from doing the daily photo, and you even released a photography course, and we're doing tours. So that's interesting.
And well, I mean, it all disappeared, like within a short period of time. Like all my income, basically, I think like 95% of it, I calculated. All the projects I had going on with tourism boards, the tours I had lined up, affiliate sales, everything, even just plain old traffic to the website, just went down to almost nothing in an incredibly short period of time in March of last year. Like I had a whole bunch of stuff planned and it all went away. And I was kind of put in a position, and I know you guys are in the same boat, where I kind of had to figure out what the hell I was going to do, because I don't think when I looked at the problem, I didn't think, and I still don't think, that it's going to be something that's just going to solve itself quickly. Even though vaccinations are starting, and the US has actually been pretty good about it compared to some countries. You look at what's happening in Brazil and even in parts of Europe. Just because you're vaccinated doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to be able to travel, or that other countries are going to be open or ready, or that the tourism industry is going to be coming back. A lot of these companies were really hit hard, and they're focusing on surviving, not on spending money on marketing and promotion and stuff right now. So I was, I kind of had to have a come to Jesus meeting with myself about what I was going to do going forward.
Yeah, and so I know we've, in the travel space and went through the same thing. It was so challenging and difficult, especially because this is all we've known for 10 years, and it was that kind of identity crisis. No one could have ever predicted travel would have went away. We thought we were in quite a secure industry, but, that's life. It throws curveballs at you, and you've got to decide what to do with it. So you have pivoted in a really unique way that has taken off for you. And so you've created your daily podcast. So do you want to share with us about where that idea came from and what it is and how it's going for you?
Yeah, so I had the idea for doing another podcast that wasn't explicitly a travel podcast, and I'd had it about 2 years ago. So I got the artwork done. I bought the rights to the introduction or the intro music. I did all of that, and I never quite took off. I started doing research for the show, and the plan was I was going to tackle like one topic per episode, and they were going to be really long episodes. And my first episode was just going to be answering the question, why is the Mona Lisa the most famous painting in the world? And I was really getting into it, and I had like enough notes to do like 2 or 3 hours just talking about Leonardo da Vinci. And
Wow.
that just but the thing is, from a business standpoint, that doesn't work, right? Because having a really long show like that and that much effort into one show, it was just difficult to produce, to do a long show like that. So I just sort of put the idea on the back burner, even though I had invested money in the artwork and everything else. Then when this started,
unless you're Joe. Sorry,
yeah, there are a couple
I was
people
going
that
to
do
say
it.
unless
Like,
you're
yeah,
Joe
like Dan
Rogan. His
Carlin.
episodes push like 2+ hours. But
Yeah, but all he
that's
has to
Joe
do is
Rogan.
talk to someone. To do a
Yeah.
monologue show, I don't know if you're familiar with Hardcore History, Dan Carlin. His show is insanely popular,
I've heard of it.
but he puts out like 2 or 3 shows a year, and each one's like a 5-hour episode. But even that's a dumb business model, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because he could do so, if he had just cut that up into 1-hour segments, he would do so much better, right? Because you'd have more ads that you could run and whatnot. So I began thinking, it's like, well, maybe I could do the exact opposite of what I was thinking, rather instead of these really long ones. And I just sort of did the math. And I had a friend who did a daily show and has been doing it for several years. And he basically, when I last met him, he just said, well, this as a business works really, really well, because at a minimum, it's not quite work that way, but you're making 7 times more than a normal podcast would if it's a weekly show. And I kind of just ran the numbers that if I can get a CPM of this value, and then if I can, do it 7 times, so you're doing 365 episodes a year, blah, blah, blah. And I looked at the math, I was like, wow. Because whereas a lot of people would say, well, even if you get this many downloads, it's still not enough money to make a living. But if you multiply it by 7, it is. So I launched the show in July, and the show isn't a travel show, but it's travel adjacent, meaning I can talk about a lot of the things I've experienced or visited in the course of my travels and still do that for episodes. And the show, basically, it's about 10 minutes long. It's a scripted show, so I have to write out the script every day. And that's about, I don't know, I'd say about 1,500 to 2,500 words a day I write. And it just sort of deals with any number of things. So the show I just finished yesterday was talking about who was the 5th Beatle and all the different people who were, one of the Beatles. I've done shows on Roman history, American history, science, you name it. I've done 285 episodes now, and the traffic has just been steadily growing. This month, I was hoping to get 80,000 downloads. It looks like I'm going to hit 90. And from a surprising source too.
Awesome.
I just as a lark, so I never did like TikTok, because that was, what the kids were doing. And so just as a lark, I started posting videos where I would just take a Pinterest image and the intro of my podcast, which is like 30 seconds. And I just make a short video and I put it on TikTok. And I just would do this every day. And that was the extent of my involvement on TikTok. I don't follow anyone. I don't use it. I don't do dancing videos of me doing whatever. I just put that up. And so for months, nothing happened on TikTok, right? So about a little more than a week ago, maybe 10 days, 2 weeks ago, I had about 80 people follow me on TikTok. This morning, I have 1,200. And it just exploded all of a sudden. And I don't know why. And all of a sudden, I've had this huge spike in podcast downloads and people following me on TikTok all of a sudden. And I don't know why. So now I'm rethinking, well, maybe I should like put more thought into these videos. Maybe I could do the videos personally and do a slightly longer intro or something. But yeah, it's been a kind of a unique process because I've never really thought about TikTok before.
Yeah, I know. We the same reasons we're not on it. Although I tell my youngest daughter, she started an account for us, and so I'm like, just put our reels on there. But I have thought about how to promote our podcast using reels, but I like this idea with TikTok as well. When you say you put the intro in, it's not your standard intro, right? It's the intro for whatever the episode is.
Correct. I do a unique cold open for every single episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then I also record a 15-second version of that for Instagram to put on Instagram stories. And once TikTok started to gain momentum, I started to just use my full 30-second intro for TikTok because you have a longer video length. You can have up to 60 seconds. So I did that. And now I'm thinking, well, maybe I should even do a special one for TikTok that's a bit longer. And maybe instead of just putting an image on it, I can record it myself just to try to get more traction.
Yeah. For sure.
I mean, we've got a relatively new podcast just on Raleigh on our new niche site as well. And we're, as we're doing the podcast, we're shooting the video for YouTube and for IGTV. And I've done some pins on Pinterest, sharing a little bit of like the video vertically in that too as well. So yeah, maybe we could do some TikToking too. I'll get the kids to do it.
Are you taking care of all of this yourself?
I do everything. Absolutely everything.
No wonder
myself.
You're busy.
So it's the biggest. It's the writing and research that takes most of the time for the show. But when you do the math, so if I just the average CPM, I would say, or the number I've been using for calculation purposes for a podcast is a $25 CPM. And when you do the math by doing a daily show, each person is roughly a third of that 1,000 CPM per year. If you do, so you have 365 shows. So the value of a person, if let's say I got a $40 RPM for a show, it's because I run maybe a small post, ad or something, is worth about $14 per subscriber per year. And actually, I can get more than that because I was talking to one guy with a network in LA, and he says, well, we can get you a $50 CPM. And I know there are people that even can get higher than that. So the trick is as you grow the show, it's not like a linear thing in that, okay, you get more money, you get more revenue as you get more listeners. No, your revenue spikes. Once you hit, say, 5,000 downloads per show, you're going to see a massive jump in revenue. And the same with 10, because then you can start joining these networks where they'll sell out all your inventory. And right now I'm selling about half of my inventory. And I'm doing some stuff with some tourist boards where I'll do the whole show about something about it. So I've been doing a project with Tourism Spain. And every week I just do a show that has something to do with Spain. Whether I did one like it's a biography of Salvador Dali or from Picasso, how the Camino Santiago came to be, something like that.
Wow. Yeah. Gosh, it's amazing how you have, as you said, it's adjacent to travel, but you can bring so many elements of it in and be so creative from a monetization standpoint. And so where do you see this evolving? We know travel's going to take some time to come back. Will you continue to travel, do you think, or and incorporate it some way like that? Or are you happy now to just not and just record these? Because I know it's an intense amount of work. So how would you balance that with future travel?
For the moment, I'm happy doing what I'm doing. I'm not in a big rush to start traveling again, especially because I don't think the experience is going to be all that fantastic right now. And I'm good when it comes to travel. I've traveled a lot. I'm not in.
I think you need to get out there a bit more, man.
Like, you've done your quota.
You need to branch out a little bit and get a few more stamps on the passport. But
a day will come where, I'm going to travel again. And a podcast is something you can do anywhere. So I'm not too worried about that. But right now, I just want to focus on growing this. And So before I started traveling, I had several businesses that I ran. And when you're in startup mode, you have to kind of be in startup mode and focus on that. And all the time I was traveling, to be completely honest, I kind of treated my business in a sort of half-assed fashion because my priority was traveling, to be completely honest, not the business end of it. And even before the pandemic started, there were parts of travel blogging that I was kind of getting turned off with. I was getting kind of turned off by where all the social media stuff was going and the notion of these influencers. I don't take photos of myself. I never have. Wherever I am in the world, the least photogenic thing is me. I take pictures of other things, and this notion, this reality TV culture of look at what I'm doing somewhere is something I've never enjoyed. I don't see the point in it. And I've never really even enjoyed the whole SEO aspect of what travel's become. Well, up until recently, used to follow a large number of travel websites via RSS, not to read every article, but to see what everybody was doing. And over the last few years, I've noticed everyone is now writing the same thing. I used to get a lot of my traffic early in the day from like social media, from people sharing articles or, on Twitter and stuff. That almost never happens anymore. And for most people I've talked to, they now get the vast majority of their traffic from Google, with maybe 10, 20%, depending on how good they are at it, from Pinterest. And that's pretty much everyone. And so what everyone is publishing now is kind of the same SEO driven, keyword researched article that will perform well on Google. And you don't have to travel to do that. You literally never have to leave your house. And there are sites like The Crazy Tourist that basically they're a machine. They have this machine-driven list of keywords. They pump it out. There's no original photography. You don't even know who the writers are. They research it by going to Wikipedia, and they do really well with this model because Google rewards that. So there's no point in expertise anymore. And the other thing I noticed is that, so I've done well on other social platforms, and I had large numbers that you could look at. But whenever I met actual readers or people who followed me, more often than not, the first thing they would always mention was the podcast that I did, This Week in Travel, because you develop a connection with someone by hearing their voice in a way that you just simply cannot do via social media or reading a blog post. And that connection, I've noticed, even doing this new show, is something that it's not based on SEO. And then it's the challenge and the benefit of podcasting is you're not dependent on some other company's algorithm. And I've been burned so many times investing time into Google Plus, or trying to get a big Facebook page, and then Facebook pulls out the rug under you on their algorithm, so you can't really do anything organically anymore. Well, with podcasts, there's no podcast company. It's all kind of word of mouth, and it slowly grows, which is difficult, but you also can't get the rug pulled out from underneath you, in that the audience you're developing is yours. So I'd say it's more akin to growing an email list than it is, developing social media.
Yeah, nice. So you have a quite a large Facebook group that was connected to your travel website, and I think you renamed it recently. That's quite a sizable group. Are you still, and an engaged group, from what I noticed, are you still engaged with that to a degree?
Yeah. The problem simply is there just isn't much to talk about. Like, everything was just, here's another story about the virus.
Sure.
Here's something up. It was just. And This Week in Travel, the other podcast, we stopped recording that for several months because we had nothing to talk about, because every episode was just talking about the virus again, and that became a bit boring. So I rebranded the group. It was the Everything Everywhere group, and I renamed it the League of Extraordinary Travelers. And I think I'm going to put a lot of my travel stuff going forward under that brand to try to make more of a community website And I was even thinking of maybe doing, events in person before all this happened, just as a place for people who are very well traveled. Because if you and I know you've been to a lot of like the travel conferences and stuff, but like the New York Times Travel Show and these other things, these are just mass consumer events where you have the sandals resorts and this stuff and the big cruise lines. And it doesn't really cater to this group of people who are very well traveled, spend a lot of money on travel, prefer traveling more independently and going to exotic destinations. And there just really isn't anything for them. So
Yeah. Yeah, that's so true.
And you also had a big focus on World Heritage sites. I'm not sure where you're up to with that number as well, but you've quite extensively covered them. So
like 405 now.
Interesting.
And part of that is was the genesis of my current podcast, was doing history. And one of the things that I've announced on my podcast is when it's possible, and I don't know when this is going to be, I want to do tours for my listeners, but the tours I'm going to do are not going to be we spend 2 days in this city, we spend 2 days in this city, and then you just jump from city to city. I want to do a tour where we go to Rome, you put your crap in your hotel room, and we stay there for 10 days. And we see all the stuff that no one ever gets to see in Rome. And you do a really deep dive because everyone goes, they go to the Colosseum, they go to the Vatican, they go to Trevi Fountain, a couple other things, and then that's it. But there's so much there that most people completely miss or they don't even know exists. And there's several cities like that have very deep histories where there's far more than you can really see in one visit. So I want to do these deeper dive type tours.
Yeah, that's such an awesome idea because I know that's one reason we've never really done tours because like we're long-term travelers. We like to go deep into a region. I mean, it's great to, see those things like the Colosseum and all of that, but usually that's not the stories you typically tell after your trip. It's more about getting lost walking around Rome and, having a pizza or a drink with a local that you just randomly came across. So I love that concept that you're thinking of doing that. Immersive, you can't beat immersive travel. And I think so many long-term travelers, that's why we keep doing it, because we have those experiences more than just the bucket list check stuff.
And as I'm doing the show, I'm doing research and coming up with places that I didn't even know about that I want to go see.
Yeah.
And this is a way to kind of, merge the show into a trip and say, oh, yeah, so I talked about this restaurant, the basement of this restaurant is where Caesar was killed. And to go see it, you have to literally have dinner there and talk to the owner.
I love it.
Yeah, cool.
You get so many passionate travelers on that. I love it.
Yeah, I saw actually in that Facebook group, I've noticed you doing asking people for suggestions on things to do in particular cities and stuff. I guess is that part of the research for you?
No, that's just sort of using the
just keeping people
the collective
engaged.
Nature of the group, right? Because as I don't care how well traveled you are, a large group of travelers is probably going to be more knowledgeable than any one person. I mean, the Earth is really big.
Oh yeah.
And there's always going to be, and I'm sure you've had this as well. You go to a city and someone say, "Oh yeah, I'm going there. Where should I stay? What should I eat?" I'm like, "Man, I don't know. New York has 300 hotels. How do you? I'm going to go to hotels.com and pick someplace cheap. That's how I determine a hotel. I don't do hotel reviews. I just pick a place and stay there, and it's usually good enough, and I don't worry about it. But if you have a whole bunch of people, then they can probably provide, a bit better advice. And I think when it comes to stuff like that, having a large number of people kind of giving suggestions can be more helpful than just one person. Because I have really nothing to say about hotels or restaurants or anything like that, because what you can individually experience for something like that is so small compared to the universe of things that are available.
Yeah.
You have no idea if you're visiting the best place or, even if it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I know was interviewed recently and one of the questions I haven't finished it yet because I can't answer the question, but it's name 3 of your favorite hotels or restaurants in the world. And I'm like, I said to Craig, I don't know. I can't even really remember any. It's kind of like it's not our focus. We eat at lots of great places, but I'm not sort of, as we're like you, we just book the cheapest hotel. It's just it's just a bed. It's not an experience.
It's hard enough coming up with your 3 favorite cities in the world, let alone restaurants. I mean, it's just nuts.
Yeah, and if you did, it was probably something that happened, or the view, or you were having dinner with someone that made it memorable, not necessarily the food. If something sticks out for food, it'll probably be because it's bad, not because it's, fantastic. Or you were at a really fancy restaurant. Yeah. Those aren't the things that I ever really pay attention to. And even if you have like a hotel review, if there's 300 hotels in a major city and you had a bad experience, all you've done is, whoever's ever reading that advice, okay, their universe of hotels went from 300 to 299. You're not really doing much for them. And if it's a luxury hotel, here's the dirty secret. The Four Seasons is really nice. The Ritz-Carlton is really nice. They're all really nice. If it's a luxury hotel, you don't need a review. It's nice. And you usually, if it's a chain hotel, you know what you're getting. Yeah. So I've never seen the point of it.
No, I agree.
Okay. So your podcast show it's the Everything Everywhere Daily, correct? And so 7 days a week. What number are you up to now? Like, you started, when did you say June you started last year?
200.
I started on July 1st because it was it was the start of the third quarter, which made it, the middle point of the year. So it was really easy for keeping stats. And I'm working on episode 286 today.
Wow. What, so how are you choosing the topics? And you batch recording, like you spend a day researching and then batch recording, or what's your workflow like?
I do one every day. So tomorrow's show I haven't recorded yet. And the recording doesn't take much time. That's pretty easy. It's the writing and the research that takes all the time. So I'm basically writing a 15 to 2,000 word blog post every day. And they are blog posts. So I actually take the script and I turn it into a blog post. And at some point I can actually bundle them together to make an ebook or whatever. I can do more with it. But I keep a running list of topic ideas, and then I'll go steal something from that, if I don't know what I'm going to do a show on. So, like I said, yesterday's show was about the Beatles, and the next show I think is going to be about the development of the Latin language and explaining it, because that's the other thing I've been doing during the lockdown is I've been learning Latin. And to explain how it works and how the language developed for people that don't, most people don't know Latin, and how the language developed into French and Spanish and things like that. So that'll be the topic of the next show, and I have no idea what I'm doing on Monday.
That's great. Well, you might have your first 9-year-old listener tomorrow. I'm going to get Savannah, our daughter, to listen to it, because we're looking at enrolling her in a traditional alternate school, and she will have to learn Latin if she goes to it.
I have quite a few people that have written me, and they say they listen to the show every day with their kids because it's so short before they drop their kids off to school. It's something they can listen to. I keep the show very clean.
That's great.
I don't, use any swear words, and I try to stay away from super controversial subjects. I keep it more educational, and Latin is fun. You have to go into it with the right mind, though. I tried it in high school for a semester, and then I kind of gave up. And now going back and doing it as an adult is a very different way of doing it. You don't have a grade hanging over your head. Duolingo has a course in Latin, and you can do it for free. So it's not great. It's not going to make you fluent, but it's at least something you can do every day to practice it.
Yeah,
We might have to do it alongside Savannah.
Yeah. So, what have been some of a couple of your most listened to or downloaded podcasts, and did that surprise you? The ones that were the most listened to, and what are some of your favorite ones that you've researched that like really blew your mind and found really interesting?
One of the early ones I did, for some reason, must have got shared among some community, but I did an episode on who is the most dominant athlete ever. And
Oh,
the
okay.
answer I came up with was, the world's greatest horseshoe pitcher, Alan Francis, who's
I
won
remember.
24 world championships in horseshoe pitching. And I tried to find anyone who's ever won like more world championships in their sport than this guy. And, horseshoe pitching is something you can do well into your 50s. He's still the most dominant horseshoe pitcher in the world. He's the youngest and oldest person ever to win a championship. The only other person I found that was the youngest and oldest to win a championship was in surfing, Kelly Slater, who was the youngest and oldest world surfing champion. But for a lot of sports, it's a lot harder to be dominant like that. The one I answered on, you've heard the expression, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. So I did a show on sliced bread and how the invention of sliced bread came from and where that phrase came from, that something is the greatest thing since sliced bread, and what was the greatest thing before sliced bread. And it turns out it was bagged bread. And they literally used that in their marketing campaigns, that sliced bread is the greatest thing since bagged bread.
Oh my God.
I don't know.
Cool.
Oh my God, I've done so many shows
That's
now.
fascinating.
What I did on
and
the last Crow war chief. So there was this guy in World War II, and to become a war chief in his tribe, there were 4 things you had to do. And you had to touch an enemy in combat, you had to steal their weapon, you had to lead a successful war party, and you had to steal a horse. And he achieved those 4 feats. He was from the Crow tribe in Montana. He achieved them in World War II by accident. And the last one, stealing a horse, in like the last days of the war, they encountered this camp that had a bunch of high-ranking Nazi officials, and there were like 50 thoroughbreds that they had. So before the attack began, he snuck in and stole all 50 horses before they started mortaring the encampment. And he became the last person to Plains Indian ever to earn the title of war chief, and he did it in World War II. So there's
That's
lots of stories
amazing.
like that, and there's lots of stories that I have lined up. I even did one on the Australian Prime Minister Harold Holt, who disappeared.
Oh, he went drowned. Went missing.
he did the Harold.
You know, that's a phrase we'll say if you've done the Harold Holt, or it means you've disappeared. Because you know how we do like weird rhyming stuff and everything.
It's very strange for like a world leader today to just disappear, right? And
only in Australia can that happen.
We'll have to listen to
there were a lot
episode.
of conspiracy theories at the time that he there was a Chinese submarine that picked him up and all this stuff. And I think a lot of people outside of Australia didn't really know the story of this guy. And I thought it was fascinating that a world leader could just disappear. And, there were thought, he committed suicide and everything. And, from everything I could tell, he legitimately just went for a swim and drowned.
Vanished. Yeah. The Bermuda Triangle got him.
Well, I don't know
the
about
Australian
that.
Bermuda Triangle.
Yeah.
Oh, and actually, one that might be of interest. I did a show that that talked about the origins of soccer, rugby, and American football, and how they actually came from the same sport, and the initial divisions between association football and rugby football, and how they divided, and then how American football kind of came about from rugby football, and how you would never guess it today, but they all kind of had their basis in the same sport, and that's why they're all called football. And the term football doesn't come from the fact that you use your foot on a ball. It comes from the fact that it's played on foot as opposed to on a horse, which is, so the real origins came from the fact that poor people would play it, whereas rich people played their sports like polo or whatnot on horseback.
Interesting.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's just
there you
opened
go.
up a whole new world for me now, looking at it from that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can see why the podcast has done so well, and I know will continue to do so well. I mean, it's so fascinating, the different things that you talk about, and people are naturally curious, so they just love hearing the answers to questions, really. So I know it will continue to do well. And you've inspired me, because I know, we had the same and continue to have the same frustrations with blogging and SEO and social media. And we started our podcast during the pandemic because we were like, the stories of being lost, like the real purpose for why we started traveling in the first place and why we continue to do it is to have those stories, not just to take the pretty picture, but to have those experiences and then share them. So I'm inspired to keep our podcast going now. So thank you, Gary.
Yeah, and I know you write out your script and can create a blog post and stuff, but for us, it's just so easy to talk about something, then create a blog post. The time consuming, I put it,
it is. I'm glad that you guys are doing a podcast, because I do think that you get like I said, a bond with people that you don't get just in writing. And I do think there needs to be a movement back to actually talking to people who actually travel and hearing their stories, and not just, here I am on a beach somewhere, and it doesn't really matter where that is, to just try to show this glamorous life that doesn't necessarily really exist. Travel's great. Don't get me wrong. I've devoted a lot of time to it. Now I know you guys have too, but it's not all peaches and cream all the time. And it's not always, sitting at a luxury hotel by the pool. It can be, a bit of a slog. And it can be difficult, especially when you're away from everyone you know.
Yeah.
Just
sure is.
Just curious about your research. Like, obviously depends on the topic, but do you have any particular resources that you go back to all the time? And it must be difficult, like be conflicting sources of resource, how you verify which is actually the facts and the truth. It must be very time consuming.
And all my research for the most part is done online, because I'm doing it every day. Some of it's based on books and other things that I've read in the past, but a lot of you do come across that, and you kind of just, if there's two different opinions on something, you can just give both of the opinions. There's one camp that says such and such, and there's another camp that says this. And I've had a few cases where people have disagreed with me about something I've said, and that's going to happen. I know that, because there are some. I did one on the history of the saddle, or I should say the stirrup, and how this was the simplest, most profound invention in world history. That, like, the Romans never used stirrups. And it's a real simple thing. They're just some loops that hang off of a saddle, and you put your feet in it. Yet it completely changed the world, in that it allowed you to shoot a bow and arrow, and allowed you to carry a heavy lance, and it kind of changed warfare. And, you'll occasionally get and my shows are short. They're trying to be like an introduction to a topic. I'm not doing a PhD thesis every day on something. So someone who has really done a lot of research in it can say, oh, well, actually, this and such happened, 14 years before this. And it's like, yeah, okay, they may have a point, but I'm not trying to get into that level of depth. But I've actually, for the number of episodes I put out, I think I've done pretty well, in that I haven't had to had any major corrections about anything so far. So, and some episodes are easy, like the one I did yesterday on the fifth Beatle. I barely even needed to research that, because I knew it all off the top of my head.
Yeah. No, awesome. Like you said, obviously many of your topics are going to warrant more than a 7 to 10 minute discussion. So yeah.
Good starter point for people.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah, well, we both have, I speak for Craig as well, but love chatting with you. We always get so many insights, and it's just always great to hear what you're doing. To hear how you've pivoted has just been amazing. So thanks for joining us and sharing all about that with us. And can you let all our listeners know where they can find not just your new podcast, but you on your social media and your website and all that?
The podcast is Everything Everywhere Daily, and you can find it anywhere you find podcasts. And everything else is under, you can go to my website, everything-everywhere.com, or just look for the word Gary and travel and you'll find me. I'm super easy to find. Not a lot of people with my name.
That's
so
cool.
it's, yeah. But
Yeah,
the podcast is what I'm
Gary
doing.
Arndt, and I saw I did.
Yeah.
You've got a Wikipedia page, right? So if they search your name,
yeah, I've had
there
that
you
for
are.
ages. I think one of my friends started that years ago when I started traveling or something.
Yeah.
But I haven't even looked at it recently,
Very
so I have
cool.
no idea if it's up to date. They used to prank me by putting false stuff in it every so often.
That's
that I
funny.
once finished a football game after losing a pinky.
That's hilarious.
Well, I'm about to go and mow my lawn, which is going to take about 40 minutes, so I can knock out about 4 or 5 of your episodes. There you go. I like how you can just, bite-sized chunks. That's cool.
That's something a traveler doesn't usually have to do. Mow the lawn.
No,
Yep.
I enjoy it. It's nice. It's my 40 minutes of me time and my headspace thinking or listening to something. That's the beauty of a podcast. I get to go for a walk around the neighborhood, mow the lawn, just do tasks like that. It's that medium of listening to something.
I like it too, Gary. I like when he goes out there on his lawnmower.
Yeah.
Space for me.
Well, we haven't lived in a house for 15 years. It was either, living in a condo, an apartment, a hostel, hotel, or, at my parents' place. So, yeah, I like having my own yard.
Yeah, it's nice. All right, Gary. Well, thanks for joining us. And I'm hoping that we can catch up again one day soon in real life.
Anyway. I think we will.
Yeah, we
probably
actually
within a year or so.
We've never. Well, we have been to Wisconsin briefly. We passed through Madison one night on the way to Minneapolis.
Yeah.
There you go. We have.
But if we do, we will come and visit for sure.
Well, if you want a true American football experience, the place to go is Lambeau Field, and visit the Packer Hall of Fame and come for a Packer game.
Yeah, just not on a snow day. No thanks.
Isn't every day snow day in Wisconsin?
I'm not built for that. I'll go for the tailgating and the football, but
come to a game in September. So,
all right, done deal.
Sounds good.
All right, thanks, Gary.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Why Travel Podcast. You can find show notes, episode guides, and resources at whytravelblog.com.
Make sure to subscribe to our podcast for new updates and episodes on how to travel more and create better memories.